Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Leanne Kowalski. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a white woman with long blonde hair and brown eyes. I'm wearing a black sweater with an image of bananas on it, and I'm sitting in a little office with some inspirational clippings on the wall behind me. I'm also currently residing on Munsee Lenape land. This meeting will be recorded, and a recording with closed captions made available on Nita's website afterward. Welcome to Breaking Bread with Nita Little. Our time will be structured as follows. We'll start with a little welcome and what to expect, which is happening now. And then we'll have 20 minutes with Nita Little talking about today's topic. And then there will be some time for just some open discussion. Anyone can unmute themselves or ask questions or contribute. And then we'll close with just a little bit of what's coming next for Nita. And without further ado, Nita Little.
Okay. Hello, everyone. To follow Leanne's lead, I want to actually, if you can just eliminate that and just so they can see me, that would be great. I'm going to spotlight myself. Ta-da! There. Until we do the mini PowerPoint. I wanted, well, I'm a white woman. Here I am, long gray hair, sitting in front of a window with plants behind me. And I am speaking to you from the area of the Snohomish peoples. It's up on the Puget Sound. What is the Puget Sound? Also known as the Salish Sea, because the Salish peoples were here. So to speak to you about this subject, which is the significance of co-creation in the making of emergent phenomenon. I want to talk to you about Breaking Bread, which is, Breaking Bread is this series that I'm doing, and I'm doing it mostly so that I practice and so that I don't stay out of practice, talking about subjects, studying subjects, and communicating them. And of course, there's subjects that are significant and important to me that I think need to be talked about. They are subjects that are derived from my dance practice and my work with people, and very much from my study of, which was kind of instigated by contact improvisation and 50 years at the time, not quite 50 years, it was 40 years, 30 years of contact. When I decided that this was such an important subject, that what I was learning in contact improvisation, I didn't think there were conversations being had about it. And so eventually I went and got a PhD. And from that PhD, I initiated the Institute for the Study of Somatic Communication. We call it quickly the ISSC. And the ISSC studies somatic communication. Critical to that is this particular subject, the significance of co-creation in the making of emergent phenomenon. So let me jump into what that is. And we can go to the first slide. Great. Okay. So and actually, let's head to the second one. So to look at this, we really need to study what co-creation is and what emergent phenomenon is. And I really want to first talk about emergence. And about what we're doing in having this discussion. So there's an argument, if you go online and you look at what is understood to be co-creation right now, especially as it pertains to business, which is now has picked up that word and now is running with it. you will discover that what they actually mean when they say co-creation is they mean collaborative processes. They mean the way that people negotiate what's going on, what's going to happen in this moment, and how they can create products primarily by including the end user in their thinking, their product design, all the way through to their marketing. So they get the end user to be part of the whole business practice. And there are serious problems for me with that, because when you start to talk about something as significant and important as co-creation, and you're confusing it with collaboration or collaborative practices, you're missing the depth of the possibility of what co-creation can be. So I'm making an argument against the models of the human, the current models of the human. The limitation in how people are thinking of co-creation is actually a limitation in what people think a human can be. And I will get into that as we go forward. We're going to discuss emergence, we'll discuss co-creation. And in that, we'll end up fairly political in talking about hierarchy and competition, and the problems with those, the limitation in what we think a human can be because of those, the stress on those practices, those ways of thinking. And we'll talk about why we need a new model of human engagement. Okay. Let's go to the next one. Emergence, and this is, I take this from Adrienne Marie Brown's book, Emergence Strategy, but I like the definition. Emergence is a way complex systems and patterns arise out of a multiplicity of relatively simple interactions. So what doesn't get said in this, but maybe the inference can be, is that those interactions can be interactions of difference. They're not necessarily the same interaction over and over again. Let's go to the next slide, if you will. To do that, I have to look. Okay, so let's look at what words that are used in reference to emergence. Emergence, often what we see are self-organizing systems. Think dance ensembles. An improv ensemble, particularly, self-organizes. And from that comes this third thing. The third thing is, in a relationship, we can look at you, we can look at me, and we can look at that third thing. That is the emergence, the dance itself. What is true of emergent of that which produces emergent phenomenon is that things start, the structure that is emerging, that produces emergence, is growing smarter. Think of creation. Behaviors between those relating subjects produce something that is adaptive. They're dancing. And I also think of it, another characteristic of emergence is that it comes from the bottom up, not from the top down. And I use the term peripheral intelligence when I am thinking about bodies in particular, how it is we can dance in such ways that the periphery of our being, of our form, rather than our central intelligence, our peripheral intelligence, can move the whole of me. I can allow it myself, I can hold myself so lightly that I can listen to the periphery of me and allow that to move me. So I'm not always controlling in a hierarchical form. Complexity is another characteristic of emergent phenomena. Okay. That's really as much as I want to go into slides, and the rest I just want to be talking. Susan Scorbati, who you may have know, is at Bennington College and worked with Judith Dunn. So did I. I worked with Judy and Bill Dixon, her musician, Black music partner. And Judy taught dance improvisation. And she started to make scores or produce ways of thinking about dance improvisation that aligned very neatly with Black music and jazz, Black jazz, thinking about how it is that musicians meet and think music, the patterning that they're concerned with in the production of a piece in which nobody is controlling the outcome. They may be starting with predetermined phrases, and yet from it new phrases emerge and other phrases emerge that get taken and played with in composition. So Susan and Judy both, I actually, Susan Scorbati is credited with this, but it's really, I remember it coming from Judy. And that is this working across forms, working with a musician in the way one might work with a dancer. Here's a quote from Composing While Dancing by Melinda Buckwalter. In the emergent duet, for example, this is about Susan Scorbati's work. A dancer and musician improvise a dance with music or music with dance from the forms that emerged during their play, framing the duet as between the dancer and musician, rather than, for instance, between two dancers with an accompanying musician, emphasizes the co-equal partnership at work. And from this actually is where the emergence appears. Okay. This is quite a political subject for me. That's why I raise it here, and that's why I want to get into conversation with you here. I am going to do that and get back to where I can see you. Good. There's a book on emergence, The Connected Lives of Ants, Brains, Cities, Software, by a guy by the name of Stephen Johnson. And I'm going to pluck some quotes from his work, which is something that struck me. When we're naturally predisposed rather, to think in terms of pacemakers. Now, a pacemaker, as the way he's describing it, is someone who is someone who's setting the pace, somebody who is that everyone is following, a leader, in other words, in a hierarchical system. So he thinks we're naturally predisposed to that. I think it's culturally predisposed to think in terms of pacemakers, whether we're talking about fungi, political systems, or our own bodies. Our actions seem governed, for the most part, by the pacemaker cells in our brains. Of course, if there has to be a leader, you're going to go find those pacemaker cells in the brain. So From a feminist point of view, there's a problem already. And for millennia, we've built elaborate pacemaker cells into our social organizations, whether they come in the form of kings, dictators, or city councilmen. Much of the world around us can be explained in terms of command systems and hierarchies. That's darn true. And I loved that at the top of this book, he's setting us a relationship between emergent phenomenon and the way things arise rather than the way things are predetermined by a pacemaker. The study of emergence unearthed a secret history of decentralized thinking, a history that had been submerged for many years beneath the weight of the pacemaker hypothesis and the traditional boundaries of scientific research. People had been thinking about emergent behavior in all its diverse guises for centuries, if not millennia, but all that thinking had consistently been ignored as a unified body of work because there was nothing unified about its body. So emergent phenomenon shows up in so many different ways. You can't easily capture it and name it and say, this is what it is. There were isolated cells pursuing the mysteries of emergence, but no aggregation. So then along comes Turing. And Turing's last published paper before his death in 1954 had studied the riddle of morphogenesis, the capacity of all life forms to develop ever more baroque bodies out of impossibly simple beginnings. Love that. I love that from that sentence. So he was, Turing turned all of this into mathematical tools. And he was using these tools to understand complex organisms and how they could assemble themselves without any master planner calling the shots. He was looking at the patterns of flowers, for instance. Brilliant, brilliant person, brilliant work. And then an interesting thing happened. In August of 2000, a Japanese scientist by the name of Toshiyuki Nakagaki announced that he had trained an amoeba-like organism called slime mold to find the shortest route through a maze. Nakagaki had placed the mold in a small maze comprising 4 possible routes and planted pieces of food at 2 of the exits. Despite its being an incredibly primitive organism, a close relative of ordinary fungi, with no centralized brain whatsoever, the slime mold managed to plot the most efficient route to the food, stretching its body through the maze so that it connected directly to the 2 food sources. Without any apparent cognitive resources, the slime mold had solved the maze puzzle. So what's going on here? The slime mold spends much of its life as thousands of distinct single-celled units, each moving separately from its other comrades. Under the right conditions, those myriad cells will coalesce again into a single larger organism, which then begins a leisurely crawl across the garden floor, consuming rotting leaves and wood as it moves about. When the environment is less hospitable, the slime mold acts as a single organism. When the weather turns cooler, the mold enjoys a large food supply, and it becomes a they. So the slime mold is constantly going from a singular to a multiplicity. How significant that is when we're talking about co-creation. And this is where I want to tie all of this together, is that this ability for something as primitive as a slime mold to move between forms. The slime mold oscillates between being a single creature and a swarm. Anyone who has ever contemplated the great mystery of human physiology, how do my cells manage to work so well together, will find something resonant in the slime mold swarm. If we could only figure out how the dictyostelium pull it off, maybe we could gain some insight into our own baffling togetherness. What's being referred to there, of course, is the fact that our cells are acting independently together. Independently, they decide to be a cell that could be anything, decides to be a liver and functions together in the formation of a livering, for instance, so that luckily we have a liver. How do we disrupt the constant individualism? And this is Adrienne Marie Brown, and she's looking at social structures. How do we disrupt the constant individualism of creation when it comes to society, our shared planet, our resources? The more people who co-create the future, the more people whose concerns will be addressed from the foundational level of this world. Meaningful collaboration both relies on and deepens relationship. The stronger the bond between the people or groups in collaboration, the more possibility you can hold. Now, she's talking of collaboration, and she has, again, is doing this thing of confusing co-creation and collaboration because they're quite similar. I mean, I understand them as different because I need a term I can use that is not collaborative, but that pinpoints, that identifies, that gets to what happens when I stop distinguishing my body from my partner's body when I'm doing a contact improv dance. I am acting as my partner. Of course, I can individuate in an instant, but I can also do that other co-creative thing. And when I am acting as my partner's body, what my partner knows immediately becomes my knowing. It's not a response. It is a communion. The difference between response and communion is really significant here. Responsive action produces collaboration. Communicative action or communion creates co-creation in my world. That distinction, I think, is significant. Otherwise, I have no way to describe what it is that gets produced by me and my partner. That is the dance. That is greater than me, that is greater than my partner, and that is there. Of course, there are times in contact when it's negotiation. Of course, there's times when it's collaborative, negotiated practice. But that's not the dance that is so extraordinary. That's not the dance that absolutely sets my heart to singing and makes me know that dancers are brilliant beyond what I get to experience in most of my world. So, yeah, so co-creation. What is it that's co-creation? Well, I just gave you one of my things that I think is important. And why will this not come over? Yeah, good. Co-creation. I found this wonderful description in a book called Gut Feminism, New Wave, New Directions in Women's Studies. And in this particular moment, the author, Elizabeth Wilson, is describing Thomas Ogden, who was, she says, has been one of the most articulate contemporary theorists of transference. He's a psychiatrist. He begins his important paper on the analytic third with an assertion of the profound entanglement of analyst and analysand, and saying, I believe that it is fair to say that contemporary psychoanalytic thinking is approaching a point where one can no longer simply speak of the analyst and the analysand as separate subjects who take one another as objects. So this loss of subject-object relationship is what happens when co-creation happens. That's why I have to use the preposition as when I'm describing dancing as my partner. I'm no longer dancing with my partner. To dance with my partner, there has to be a boundary. I have to be a singular being, and so does my partner. But when I give up the singularity of being and I allow myself to be a multiplicity, Nita, the multiple me, Nita, the multiple me that is a cellular being. And I change scales. I'm going from the scale of the very, very small to the human scale. And from that human scale, there is still a multiplicity because on the human scale, I encourage the multiple me. The multiple me now includes my partner, and I'm dancing as my partner. I hope you understand that language. It's irregular, I understand. So that irregularity is something that Ogden is going in his psychological practice, going, oh my God, we can't say that we're subject-object here in this room. Ogden doesn't just dispute the classical notion of and now I'm back in his paper. Ogden doesn't just dispute the classical notion of the analyst as a blank screen. He also skillfully complicates the idea of countertransference. He focuses not on two streams of psychic events, the analyst and the analysand, but on the intersubjective experience, the analytic third that the session generates. We call this the dance, right? This is the dance. This is the thing that we do when something arises that is greater than either one of us. This intersubjectivity owned by no one exists in a dynamic tension with the subjectivities of the analyst and the analysand. The intersubjective and individually subjective each create, negate, and preserve the other. Okay, the task of analysis is, well, anyway, the analytic third is not a single event experienced identically by two people. It is an unconscious, asymmetrical co-creation of analyst and analysand, which has a powerful structuring influence on the analytic relationship. What I want to point out about that sentence is the term unconscious. And why do I want to talk about the unconscious? Because I want to point to the fact that it's probably happening on scales of being that are not normally doing the processing. I think I have people on my roof, guys. This is a little, I'm looking out the window and I just saw a man up on my roof. So I know we have to have our roof replaced. So I think it might be happening right now. Leanne, how long have I been going?
You're doing great.
Okay, I'm just about to end.
To transition. Okay, great.
Great, good. Okay, so this is from a book that I've really enjoyed. It's called Matters of Care, Speculative Ethics in More Than Human Worlds by, oh my gosh, I don't know how to pronounce this woman's name, guys. Maria Puig de la Bellacasa. So it's by the University of Minnesota Press. Some beautiful things in this particular writing. She's talking about permaculture and the way that in permaculture, she's speaking particularly about this guy, Bill Mollison, who speaks of an embodied immersion in ecological cycles that involves a long period of thoughtful and protracted observation before acting on the land and its processes. The principle known as TAPO is a rule of technical design and an ethical principle in training in permaculture practice. So that observation is an ongoing one because it requires each cycle of an event so they can discern diet, choice, selection, season, weather, digestion, and regeneration differ each time the cycle happens. And it is in such variation that the possibilities for diversity thrive. So here's what gets really interesting. That the soil care practitioners often speak about similar kinds of immersion in the repetitions of cycles of soil life, by which they learn the needs of the landscape and by which a particular ecological environment also learns and adapts to human practice. So now you have something, human landscape, that is now in a co-creative practice, because the landscape is adapting to the human as the human is adapting to the landscape. Again, we start to function as a multiplicity in that capacity. TAPO is an ethos that contributes to the co-creation of a particular ecology and the mutual multilateral obligations and independent doings it entails. Obligations. I want to highlight that word. The ethos of co-creation puts us in this relationship in which we have an obligation to ourselves, quite frankly. It is to ourselves. When we are in co-creative practice, we allow ourselves to act across difference in a form of becoming, of who we are. It is a different form of the human to think that way, to imagine the human does not begin and end at my skin. The human does not begin and end only with humans. The human now has the possibility of being across difference. Okay, that is the end of my little setup, and I'd love to join into conversation with you. Thank you for the listening. What do you think, guys? Did I provoke something, hopefully?
Nita, I'll have to leave in a moment, but I'd like to ask you one thing. When you said about your this definition about co-creation, and you said, like, if I remember, it's like the loss of the subject-object relationship.
Object-subject.
Object-subject, yeah. What is the object and what is the subject when you're talking about dance, for example?
Oh, well, if I'm dancing with you, you're the object and I'm the subject. You're not me. And so what you're producing is what I'm working with. And it's not me. To do the turn of me co-creating with you, I have to be entangled with you. I have to allow myself to understand that what you produce is not different from me. I give up this singularity of single identity of Nita, and I identify as the dance that is us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the same as it's not that we are dancing now. And here's where, when I was talking about the slime mold, the it that he was talking about wasn't the singular beings. The it he was talking about was when all those little beings that in one moment could be they, all of them, are now a singular it. And that's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So now there is no subject object in the same sense. The subject is the dance.
Yes, because when you talked, I made a connection with it popped up the somatics right away. So it would be subject, two subjects, like me and you.
Yeah.
And maybe the object here and you could be where you're naming product. Because that's what the thing,
Right. So the dance, the product is the dance.
Yeah, it is what comes out, because this thing about object subject popped up. I said, but there's two subjects, so there's two human beings. So like looking the other as an object or not. So emergent form. Yeah.
Things come together, but what emerges happens on a completely different scale.
Yeah.
It's not on the same scale. So the scale of the dance is different than the scale of the dancers.
Yeah. So that's why I was thinking that the object would be the product, would be this third part more than.
Surely the product is a human being. From a cell's perspective, the product is a human being.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to put it that way, if you want to talk in terms of production, or when people get together and they are interested in having living structures, they get together, they build their houses, they build their workplaces. And the emergent structure, the emergent form is the city.
Mm-hmm.
The city is of a different order than the people that create it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's why this object subject is said, oh, it's so sort of, but it's like I think the perception I had is what you say.
Great. Anybody else? What are you thinking? Hey, Amanda, nice to see you. And Ari?
I'm thinking, and thank you so much for all those, thoughts and references too. But what I'm thinking is, this distinction between collaboration and like co-creation.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned at one point, that if we have to look for a leader, we'll find it. And there seems to be something like, I guess, about being in a state, right, that you can sort of go into. So I'm wondering, like, is it important for two people to like be in this state of co-creation rather than to be in a state of collaboration? Or do you feel like, independent of how we perceive each other or what state we're in, co-creation is sort of just happening, emergence is happening, the universe is happening, right?
Both. And I think that co-creation and forms in which one allows entanglement, immersion and entanglement, are forms that are not practiced and therefore are under utilized and not understood, not honored, not recognized, not valued. Because we value competition so profoundly in this particular capitalist, late capitalist world. We dismiss, and that's why emergence wasn't discovered until just recently. I mean, not discovered, but really discussed and understood as something that needed to be recognized and put into practice. I mean, emergence is systems theories with respect to computers is now like it's all about emergence. So when we can't distinguish collaborative processes, and honest to God, when I was young, the big deal was collaboration. Oh, how important collaboration was. I mean, there's still in schools, how important it is to teach our kids to be able to collaborate. Right? But if that's the end, if that's as deep as we go into working with one another, then we totally miss co-creation. Mm-hmm. And right now, business is totally missing co-creation, doesn't get it. What would happen in business if co-creation was where they went? How would things be different? How would we have to think the human differently if that were the case?
So just think, like following up on that, I can't resist. How I'm in education, so how could I bring that into education? Sort of, how do you understand that? How do you practice emergence?
First of all, you have to stop the notion of competition as being the highest form of individualized practice. You have to stop looking for the leaders. You have to stop with the stupidity of be a leader, for God's sakes. You have to start recognizing that actions that happen, that are created by the smallest parts of us, may produce the most brilliant work we can produce. Go for it, Eric.
I've been thinking about, you talked about in systems, and I've been thinking about, they call Siri artificial intelligence, and she can't even collaborate. Like, I can't even get her to figure out how to spell my name. So if I use talk to text, it's always, hi, this is Harry. Hi, this is Mary. She's so stupid. And that is so not intelligent. And so, and I think the only way to make intelligence, artificial or otherwise, is emergent. I don't think we can craft, micromanage, add, subtract, divide, quantify the parts and pieces that need to go into something for it to have true intelligence. Right. And so I think we'll be relying on emergent properties. I think we'll be relying on an intelligence bigger than what we can measure.
Right. I think, the universe itself is an emergent system. I mean, it is emergent. From nothing, there is something. That is the definition of emergence. And that one of the books I have read, it really basically looks at, from the Big Bang, then what? How did emergence come about? It's fascinating, the various levels of complexity that formed greater and greater complexity in biological systems and the thing that is, it's not that we want to get rid of hierarchy. It's that we want the full landscape of possibility. We don't want to say this over that. They do different things. Let's be, intelligence is when you have the possibility of adapting the right usage for each event of being. Dominating the landscape, dominating the environment does not work. We're figuring that out. Hierarchically relating to landscapes, to environments from a hierarchical perspective is stupid. So we've got a lot of growth to do here. Co-creation would be an appropriate practice in thinking environments. Yay. Thank you, Ari. That was great. I agree. I agree with everyone. This is fun.
I was also kind of thinking this is leading me toward political thought as well. I feel like in terms of the different types of intelligences that there are, like I'm still stuck on this like intelligence thing. And I'll go back to saying that I think anything truly intelligent has emerged. It hasn't been crafted by a recipe.
Right.
And
it's one of the hallmarks of emergent systems is that they're intelligent.
Right. However, when we talked about the slime mold, it had no apparent, how did you say this? It had no apparent cognitive abilities, right? Like, where did that come from? Well, so apparent, the way that men think about intelligence, that right. it's I understand the recipe, I understand the protocol, I understand who's in charge and whose role is whose, and everything's in its place. And so because men can't detect this slime mold's ability to cognate, it has no apparent cognitive functions.
Listen, do you know it's only been in the last 20 years, really, that books are being written that recognize that animals, in some instances, are more intelligent than humans. Why?
I didn't know that.
We have only been studying intelligence in animals and primates even through the lens of what humans are capable of, but not through the lens of how animals think. So of course we miss it all. Mm-hmm. I mean, we miss it all. There's a wonderful book I recommend to you. Are we smart enough to know how smart animals are? By a guy whose last name is Duvall, W-A-A-L.
Well, so I don't even think we're smart enough to know how smart humans are.
Exactly. Exactly the point
and
of
these
this.
animals.
We don't know what a human being is yet.
These animal examples very clearly illustrate all that is possible to be missing. And maybe it's easier to look at than to look at home about all that is possible to be missing here, because it so desperately threatens our belief structures. I think especially in regard to the intelligence, intuition versus analytical intelligence.
Yeah, you know how I define intuition?
No.
Yeah, the way I define intuition is if you can't tell if it's a body or a mind that's doing it, you're in intuition. Intuition is that territory between the body and the mind when you can't tell which is which. And you can quote me on that. And since we live in a world in which those two things have to be pulled apart to be talked about, we don't understand what's intuitive. We have, it's that mystery, intuition. Well, it's not a mystery. It's that we do this thing, body mind, that is so much more brilliant.
So would you call that a kind of internal co-creation? The body
Hi,
mind.
Suzanne.
Yes,
Hi.
hi Nina. Thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thank you.
And that just spurned a spontaneous thought, body mind. The polemic, is that a kind of internalized body mind intuition? Is it a kind of internalized co-creation? In that together,
you know, that well could be. That's an interesting way of understanding it. I see it as a continuum. I see it as a Mobius body mind. If one thinks of a Mobius appears to have two surfaces, just as a circle, any object that's in a circle does. But if you run your finger along it, you find that the interior surface is the same as the exterior surface. They're not separate. But what makes that happen and what is significant to a Mobius is that you have to be in motion. And if one thinks of if you stop it at any point, if you stop moving at any point, you have two surfaces, an inside and an outside. To me, that's what a human being is. You stop the human at any point. You measure this instant right now, and you end up with two different things, a body and a mind. A dead body and where's the mind, right? But if it's in motion, it's one thing. And that thing I understand is a continuum. The other is always present. It's never just one. It's always, the other is always present. However, one may dominate in the moment.
So that continuum is participating in a resonance, a kind of resonance of mind and body, the internal world and external world. A resonance that can maybe even.
But I don't believe in a local mind. You have to understand. I think mind is probably non-local, because my touch is not limited to my skin. My touch, actually, I can touch the wall.
Right.
Where I am. I can move my face along that wall, no problem. So there's something that is body in my mind as it moves across the wall.
Yeah, wonderful. The collaborative notions versus a co-creation. The talk itself spurred interest as I'm trying to collaborate with artists from another country, and we're using this platform. And at some points we feel as if we can touch each other's bodies.
Exactly.
And so it's really interesting. I've never done this before. In terms of creation, eventually we'll be physically together, but this mediated platform still allows some possibility and potentiality of touch or feeling or sensing.
Yes, it does. It does. Quite profoundly. There's a woman, Lisa May Thomas, who is in the UK, who has worked with dance movement and creation and what do you call when you put the 3D on?
Yeah, what is that? The
virtual reality, right? Yeah, and touch becomes a part of that. It's quite interesting. Yeah. So this is fun. Thank you for being here to listen to me expound on this nugget that I've been chewing on for a while. In context with the ISSC, with the Institute for the Study of Somatic Communication, because that which I'm talking about is somatic. It requires, it's the many that I also am is the somatic experience. When I'm talking on the level of my flesh form, when I'm speaking on the level of the human scale, changing scale to the human scale, the multiplicity that I am is, I don't know that it is informed by the somatic when I allow it. And allowing it to be informed by the somatic, allowing these scales to be mutually informing means that we start to allow ourselves to be, to listen to the smallest, to be peripherally intelligent.
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
So, it's fun. It's good. It's good. It's good in dance. I teach a dance composition mentor. I have a mentorship that I call Composing Emergence. And Composing Emergence really works with these notions in practice, in art making practice. How does this understanding change our art making practices? How do we stop thinking about the singular artist's genius and we start looking at what happens in art making? We stop the domination of the singular, the independent, the individual. So
that might be a perfect segue to our little conclusion, Nita, if I may.
Go for it, babe.
Thank you, everybody. This has been Breaking Bread with Nita Little, a new series offered monthly for free. This recording will be available on Nita's website, and we'll be back next month with a new topic. And we're always open to feedback on how we can make the experience even better. I want to let you know that Nita's online relational intelligence class is back every Wednesday, and that there are still 2 spots available in her Composing Emergence online mentorship, which starts up in just a few days on January 30th. Nita also has merch available now. And
oh my God, yes.
Your t-shirt with a Nita-ism on it. And for more information on those and other upcoming events, classes, offerings, you can head over to Nita's website, which is nitalittle.com. Thank you all so much for being here today. And
thank you, everyone. I'm grateful to you for being here because it gives me the opportunity to really do this thinking. I like to think out loud.